So this is something a little different than what I typically do, you know, with the whole like drift car and yada and all that type of thing. This is a 1988 4Runner that I recently traded my old winter daily, which was a Neon SRT4, for this. I'll do just a quick walk around. This truck was a nice blue color. So of course, as you do, the first thing you do is you cover it with a fantastic camo paint job here. But all the windows work. The rear one works. It just needs to be rewired. Somebody cut the switch out, so I gotta do that. Looks like the door was replaced or repainted, it looks like. I think it looks like it was repainted. Or maybe this truck was originally red and somebody painted it blue. I'm not sure, but whatever. But yeah, all the windows work. That's good. The suspension, it's got some pretty aggressive sag in the rear, so we'll be addressing that. Be addressing tires and brake lines and all that type of stuff. In the engine bay here, this thing does run and drive. I actually drove it about an hour home. Yeah, I found out the headlights don't work too. That was fun. But yeah, I've got a whole bunch of stuff to do. The interior is kind of tore apart. It was all thrown back here. I took everything out and kind of set it around the shop just to clear up some space. But I think the first thing I'm going to do is, because I'm waiting on some parts to do a tune-up, I think the first thing I'm going to tackle is the wiring for the rear window. It's probably hard to see, but the wiring is all cut here, and there's a switch for the window lock and the switch for the actual window switch are just kind of cut off here. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip off right before this connector, and the guy that I got the truck from added these wires here. So I think I'm going to actually end up cutting it before those, add a connector, a Deutsch connector there, so that everything is nice factory. There isn't those soldered connections there. They're fine and all. It's like soldered and heat shrinked, but I want it a little bit cleaner than that. So I'm gonna plan on doing that. I think it should be long enough to reach as it is. And then we'll work on getting this interior out too, because it smells in here. The carpet is pretty nasty. I'm gonna see if I can clean it. I'm not sure if I will be able to, but we'll try. Okie doke. So I had to do some Google images searching and some Google form searching, because the colors aren't actually for like. And of course, whoever cut the switches out, they cut the connectors off. At least the connector was still here for the window lock, so I was able to match those up. But for the actual window switch itself, I only had half of it. So luckily I was able to find the other side, a picture of the other side of this connector. So I was able to kind of just like hold the connector like this and see where each of the wires need to line up. And now I got the ignition on, and when it goes up and when it goes down, so that is good. It all works. I'm gonna turn it off, get the chassis side pinned together, and then get that back together. I was messing around with some stuff in here, and I found this plastic trim piece. This actually wasn't on. It was shoved underneath one of the back seats when I was driving home, but I took everything out and I found it. And if I have the deck lamp button on, the rear cargo light actually works. So that's cool, that works now. And then if I take a look at the dome light. So the dome light wasn't working. I replaced the fuse in the fuse box, which is underneath the kick panel. It's up there, hard to see. And it still wasn't working, but then if I kind of push on the dome light like this, it actually does work. So I'll have to figure out what's not quite making contact and where, and get that sorted and figured out. It doesn't seem to be working on the on position. It works with the door position though, kind of. I don't know. It's goofy. I'll have to mess with it a little bit, figure out what's going on. Leave that off for now. It's the next day. I went into a little bit of a rabbit hole of this truck last night. I was chasing a bunch of weird things. The first thing I noticed was when I put the 7.5 amp fuse in for the dome light, then the parking lights, so all the corner lights stayed on, would not go off. The only way I could get them to go off was if I pulled that fuse. The same is true with the cluster lights. Those would stay on, they would not come off unless I pulled that fuse. Another thing is, the guy that I bought this truck from, he got this from somebody in Kentucky because they drove it to a gas station. The truck just kind of died and it never started back up. So what the guy that I got the truck from did is he searched on forums, couldn't find anything. So what he did is he added a 12 volt accessory power, and he just soldered that to the fuel pump wire, because this blue wire is what actually feeds the fuel pump power, and he just had a 30 amp fuse in here. But I don't want that. I want the truck to work as it's supposed to, because let's say I am off-roading with this, or I get in an accident or something happens, I don't want the fuel pump to keep running if the engine isn't running. So I started delving into a bunch of things to see what's maybe going on. I know the original owner had it taken to Toyota and they replaced the opening relay, which is this guy here. And what this opening relay does is it gets power from two different spots. It gets power from the ignition when you switch it to start. It also gets power from the EFI main relay. So what's supposed to happen is when you start the truck, it gets power from that switch. That'll kick the fuel pump on, it'll start the truck. And then what happens is this relay is actually triggered on with the AFM, the airflow meter. This works the same way as an early Miata does. So this AFM here has this little switch, you can see it there. And when I move this gate in here, so when air starts to go through the engine, it closes that circuit and it'll turn on that relay. So I tested all that. I tested the continuity through these wires. That's all good. I tested the actual switch itself. That's good. Everything's nice and clean in there. That all checks out well. But what didn't check out well is the fact that the starting or this opening relay is not getting any power from the EFI relay. And that alongside the fact that those lights were doing the weird stuff with that fuse installed, that leads me to believe that there's some sort of wiring issue behind the dash on the main harness. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this dash out. It's probably best to do that anyways, make sure everything's nice and clean back there. And then I'm going to take a look at the wiring and see what's going on. I have the main dash out. That was actually super easy to get the thing out of here. Seats are out, and I have to say, it's weird working on something this old that's not from Wisconsin, because every bolt didn't break. It was awesome. Everything came loose super easy. I mean, there's a little bit of rust, but it's nothing compared to what it would look like if it was from here. So it looks like this wiring kind of goes up, goes around, up behind the dash or behind the HVAC stuff, and then across that side. And actually I can see, let's take a look on the other side. That almost looks like something got hot and melted. So I think I'm going to have to actually take the harness completely out. So I'm gonna have to pull a lot of this stuff out in order to do that. But yep, sure enough, that is most likely our issue. It looks like, yeah, that looks like a black wire, the big one. And there's that smaller one there. I'm wondering if that's maybe one of the illumination wires or something like that. So maybe a mouse got up there, chewed that, or maybe it shorted, or who knows. But I think I'm gonna work on taking this ductwork out. We'll take this out, and then maybe take this bar out. I'll probably have to drop the column to do that, to get to that wiring. But yeah, that looks like that is definitely our issue. You might be able to tell how this is going by the way everything's laid out here. So I think I found what happened. On that plug over there, there's this little piece of wire that definitely was cut or snipped or something and was shorting out. And there was some tape on this wire here that looked like it was cut and taped back together. This wire here is like the power for the tail light and dash lights, and this wire is melted completely all the way through here, all the way up until here. So I'm going to have to take all of that out, rebuild that whole section. The only thing is I'm not entirely sure what kind of connector is in the back side of this fuse box, so I'll have to figure that out. I'm gonna get started on that. I'm gonna start cutting all this old stuff out. You can see like this is just a completely bare wire that was shorting against everything. Honestly, kind of surprised this thing didn't burn to the ground. The fuse didn't even pop. That's the craziest thing. I have the fuse somewhere in here, somewhere, and yeah, it was still good. So I don't know. I'm definitely replacing that fuse. I don't trust it. But yeah, I'm gonna have to cut out a bunch of stuff here, redo a bunch of stuff. But I think it should be savable. I'm not really seeing anything that would cause a break in the wire for the EFI though. So I'll have to take a look at that, see why that is. Maybe it's just, it looks a little bit corroded on here. So maybe it's not making good contact with the relay or something. I don't know. We'll have to take a look, but first I gotta fix all this other stuff. I have a majority of the bad stuff cut out. So it's really a lot of the dash wiring. And then it was definitely shorted with the dome light. So that makes sense that with the dome light fuse in, I was getting my corner lights on because that's the wiring that goes to all of the corner lights. So that makes sense. So I kind of just pulled everything away that was affected. So got this wire here that goes to the parking lot on that side. Got these two wires here that go to the back. I'm assuming that one of them is for the right, one of them is for the left. I want to double check in the service manual and just make sure before I tie everything back together. Then over here, we've got 3 wires. So I'm assuming one of them, actually maybe one of these goes to the rear on this side, one of them goes to the front, and maybe one of them is kind of the main power from the fuse box or something. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to look at the actual service manual to figure that out. Another thing I'm doing too is, since I have the fuse box over here, I have my positive in the back of the EFI relay, and then I have my negative on the opening circuit here, and I've got good continuity. So that means that the wire is good all the way through. So I'm not exactly sure why it wasn't getting power from that. It might actually just be a dead EFI relay, but this still doesn't make sense because that also powers like the ECU and stuff. I'm gonna double check that on the service manual and see what I can find. But yeah, it looks like a majority of the wires were okay. There were some that were kind of like stuck together, but they weren't melted together. So I was able to take a lot of those apart. There's this red one here that it was melted to the actual wire. So I'll have to fix that. I'm gonna cut this section out and then solder in a new piece of wire. The green ones, I'm gonna solder those all back together. I just want to make sure this one here is green with the blue stripe. So I want to look at the manual, see what that actually goes to. I have to fix the connector that's on that side of the truck that was grounding against something. Next, I'm going to double check all these wires, just make sure everything is 100% okay. And then I'm going to solder everything back together, make sure everything is good to go. I have to reinsert this back into the fuse box. I have to figure out what I'm going to do with this one. I'm gonna see if maybe I can uncrimp this one or this wire here and crimp on a new piece of wire for that circuit, but I'll have to figure that out. But yeah, we'll get that fixed and then get the wiring all back together and then see if we can maybe get some power to that opening relay. Maybe. So it might be a little difficult to see here, but this is gonna be goofy. If we look at this diagram here, we can see that there is a green wire that comes off of the headlight system, and that goes to all of the corner lights. And then the green with the blue, it's marked as G-L because B is black. That goes to the rear license plate lights. So that actually makes sense. So that should in fact be tied in. So we'll get that tied back in with all of the illumination wires. So that's good there. I have everything figured out now. So I fixed all of the wiring that was all melted together over here. I fixed where it was shorting on that bottom piece there. I still have to lumen everything back together. I just wanted to kind of put everything back together, make sure everything worked as it should. It does. I tried to make this video earlier without having a paper diagram and just by using like a diagram on my phone. It was pretty difficult to follow. So I'm gonna redo it here. I figured out the issue with the fuel pump. So first, let's kind of go over how the fuel pump is actually triggered on this truck. So if we start here, we've got the EFI fuse, follow down, we've got an EFI relay. Then we have this guy here, this is the opening circuit. And essentially what happens is this opening circuit, it gets power from the EFI relay via the EFI fuse, and it also gets power from the ignition when you turn the truck to run. And basically what happens is the AFM, the airflow meter, when that starts to open, when the engine is cranking, it'll close this relay, which will tell the pump to turn on. Then if the engine shuts off, that'll open, the contacts will open, and this guy will turn back off and it'll turn the fuel pump off. So what ended up happening with this truck here is the opening circuit was actually working as it should. Everything was working great, which makes sense. Toyota replaced this with a brand new one when the guy brought it to the dealership. But what I noticed was that the power from the EFI relay was only like 0.6 volts or something like that. So what I ended up doing is I took the main relay from my Miata, and it actually ended up working as the EFI relay. I couldn't necessarily understand the diagram that's on the factory relay. It's kind of hard to read. It doesn't actually show which pins are what. And I couldn't find anything online. So I just kind of plugged it in. It's still a 4-pin. And when I put the key in and I put it on the run, the relay kicks on. I get 12 volts to that relay, and truck starts right up. Now that I've got a little bit of a head start on the electrical stuff, it's time to do a little bit of a tune-up. So I have a K&N drop-in filter, and I also have some new OEM plugs. So I'm going to slap this guy in, slap the new plugs in, make sure they're gapped to the correct amount, and see if I can get this thing to run like a top. I have the new plugs in, I have the new air filter in, and it's still running a little bit rough. So I got a few things to try and help with this. One, I got some new fuel line to replace the line that goes from the return line up to the tank because it leaks like crazy and it stinks. So I'm gonna replace that. I also got a couple cans of seafoam to dump in the tank because who knows how long this stuff has been sitting. I did put about a full tank of gas in it, but I want to run that through. I got some throttle body cleaner, and I also got some spray seafoam. So I'm gonna run this through and see if we can clean up the engine a little bit. So I'm gonna start with the fuel line. I'm gonna get that replaced so that it stops dumping fuel everywhere. This is from Spring and Block, but it dumps underneath. So I'm gonna crawl underneath, get that replaced, and then start doing the other stuff. The old fuel lines that go to the top hat are replaced. This was the return, and it looks like it's pretty old and cracked. And I did put new clamps on it, but it didn't help. It still seeped through the actual hose. So I'll take a quick look at the new stuff here. So hopefully that fixes that leak there. And then I'm working on the throttle body right now. I got my knife in here just to kind of keep it open, but grab a flashlight here. This Berryman stuff really does a good job. This stuff here, it cleaned everything up super nice. Let me get the knife out of here so you can actually see the throttle body itself, nice and clean. So that's looking super nice. I also cleaned, I think that's an idle air hole. I'm gonna let that sit. I'm gonna clean that a couple more times because this thing idles like trash. So I'm assuming that's just super plugged up in there. So I'm gonna get that as clean as I can. And then once that's done, I'm gonna put the intake back on. I did already smoke test this engine, and surprisingly, there didn't seem to be any vacuum leaks. So that's good. So I'm gonna get this stuff all nice and clean, and then I'm gonna pull it outside so I don't smoke out the shop, and then run some seafoam spray through it, see if I can get it to clean up a little bit on the inside, and we'll go from there. After just cleaning the throttle body, it's definitely a little bit better. I'll run some of this through and see how good we can get this thing to go. I don't know how much my GoPro has actually been recording because it was out in the sun, it was getting pretty hot. But with replacing those that return line, and I also replaced the evap line, no longer leaking, so that's awesome, that's great. And then with seafoam in the tank, and then running the seafoam through the intake, cleaning the throttle body, This thing runs and drives great now. I mean, before, if I put this thing into reverse, it would immediately stall and die. Now, I can put it in 4 low, in reverse, drive, doesn't matter, and it just does it. Yeah, this thing is running so much better now. So much better now. And I'm sure it'll continue to get better the more I drive it with seafoam that's in the tank right now. That'll run through and help clean things up. So I need to do some brake stuff, but then I'm gonna start driving it and just drive the heck out of it and see how good this thing can run. Unfortunately, when I was doing all the wiring inside of the truck, I ended up shorting the cluster against the metal part of the dash. But what I ended up doing is I took some really thin wire here and I soldered it to the flex board because there was a break there. There's a break over here. So I soldered it this way so that it back feeds instead of going through the part that's missing. And then I also fixed this section here. So I ended up just using some wire and then just did some hot glue over it. Hopefully that works. I was just going to replace the cluster, but a new SR5 cluster is like minimum of $400 on eBay used. So I figured we'll try and fix this one first before I spend a bunch of money. So I'm gonna get this installed and see if it works. Okie doke, got it back installed. If I turn on the lights do in fact work. And then if I put the key in, don't mind the terrible buzzer. But that all works. RPM works, coolant gauge works, oil pressure works. The only thing that isn't working right now, for some reason, is the gas gauge. But I don't know if that's because of the cluster or if that's because of the actual pump. So I'll have to figure out what's going on with that. But for now, that is more than good enough. It has been actually quite a bit of fun getting this thing to where it is now. Between ripping the wiring out and fixing all that stuff and getting the EFI stuff figured out with that relay and doing the tune-up on here, this thing has really come a long ways in the week that I've had it. I am going to stop this video here. I've already started editing and I had to cut out a bunch of stuff that to shorten the length of it. So I'm gonna stop this one here. I still have a bunch of stuff to do on this truck, like a bunch of suspension stuff, some brake stuff, headlights, maybe some more engine-based stuff, a bunch of interior stuff, radio. I have a lot that I want to do. Paint. I gotta get rid of this. This is not super great. But we're gonna make a separate video on some of that stuff because this is getting pretty long and I don't want to have just like a bunch of random stuff in one video. So I'll keep this one to the initial, first part of everything where I dive into the wiring, fix all that stuff, get it to actually run decent, so on and so forth. And in the next video, I think I'll do like the brakes and whatnot and just get everything to actually drivable so I can drive it back and forth to work. And then we'll do some interior stuff, the paint, so on and so forth. But leave a like if you like the video. I'm really just making this video as kind of like a, hey, let's see what this thing started at when I first got it and what does it look like now when it's all finished. But if someone else enjoys it, that's cool too. So thanks for watching. See you in the next one.